Let's imagine the smoky spotlight on a small stage in the Harlem of the 1930s, illuminating a wide-eyed child still too young to understand the heights he'd ascend or the struggles he'd face. Born on December 8, 1925, in Manhattan's Harlem district, Sammy Davis Jr. arrived into the world as the son of two vaudeville performers, African-American entertainer Sammy Davis Sr. and Elvira Sanchez, a Cuban-born tap dancer who identified as Puerto Rican for years. At the time, nobody could have guessed that the child cradled backstage between his parents' performances would evolve into a groundbreaking superstar who smashed racial barriers, dazzled as an all-around showman, and hobnobbed with the highest circles of American culture and politics. Yet Sammy Davis Jr. did all that, and more, forging a life that soared with achievements and cracked under the weight of public and private battles. As an infant left to be raised by his paternal grandmother, his father and mother lived the vaudeville circuit, traveling from city to city. By the time Sammy Jr. was 3, his parents separated. Sammy Davis Sr. took the boy on the road, determined not to lose custody. Along with Sammy's godfather, Will Mastin, the two men formed the nucleus of a traveling act that eventually became the Will Mastin Trio, headlined by a tiny dancing dynamo, hardly big enough to tie his shoes. They dressed Sammy in miniature versions of grown-up stage outfits, letting him tip and twirl about while older men sang or tapped around him. Audiences lapped it up. They saw a cherubic toddler with boundless energy, even if the boy probably had no clue how different his early life was from that of most children. But in those formative years, Mastin and his father diligently shielded him from the ugly face of racial prejudice. If a snub occurred because he was black, they brushed it off as mere jealousy. "Show them your best steps, kid," they might have said, and watch how quickly they hush up. By age 7, Sammy had scored his first film role, playing the title character in Rufus Jones for President. In that short film, he sang and danced alongside Ethel Waters, mesmerizing those who saw it. He was still a child star in a world where the black and white big screen rarely gave kids of color a chance. Yet there he was, bounding across the stage, all bright eyes and grin, no notion yet of the complicated path that lay ahead. For a while he lived in Boston's South End, hoofing and singing at a local bar and grill run by Izzy Ort, delighting patrons who had never seen a child with such unstoppable flair. The future was an open road waiting for him. Little could he know that World War II would intervene before he'd fully grown into adulthood. In 1944, Sammy Davis Jr. was drafted into the U.S. Army. He was 18, and the war was still raging overseas. One might imagine his illusions of stardom colliding harshly with the raw reality of basic training. The big stage replaced by a bunk and a uniform. Worse, he faced relentless abuse from white Southern soldiers. He'd later recount how it felt like a fight erupted every couple of days. His nose was broken multiple times and ended up permanently flattened. Once a group gave him a beer laced with urine, a disgraceful form of racist humiliation. Eventually, the Army moved him into special services, letting him entertain troops. He'd put on a show, look out into the crowd, and spot men who'd harassed him, but now they were clapping. The irony was never lost on him. Still, his talent carried him forward. He used that gift as a weapon, as he once put it. It was my way to fight, to change a man's thinking. After his discharge in 1945 at the rank of private, Sammy Davis Jr. returned to performing with his father and Will Mastin, touring clubs in places like Portland, Oregon, while also dabbling in recording. Under pseudonyms like Shorty Muggins and Charlie Green, he cut a few blues tracks in 1949. Then, in March 1951, the Will Mastin Trio got their big break at Ciro's in Los Angeles as the opener for Janis Paige. They were slotted for a quick 20-minute set, but Sammy's impressions and comedic banter wowed the audience so completely that they performed almost an hour. Page, far from annoyed, insisted they reverse the order of the show from that night on. Just like that, critics began praising Sammy individually, though he always included the trio in his billing out of loyalty. Davis's star rose rapidly. He recorded albums, garnered critical acclaim, and in 1953, ABC offered him and the Will Maston Trio a television pilot called Three for the Road. The network spent $20,000 filming a pilot that portrayed African Americans as striving musicians. That might not sound radical now, but in the early 1950s, sponsors balked at supporting a show that didn't reduce black performers to comedic buffoons or maids. Unable to find a sponsor, ABC dropped the project, an early bruise in Sammy's quest for mainstream acceptance. He soon found more success when cast to sing the title tune for Six Bridges to Cross in 1954, inching further toward the big time. But later that same year, Sammy Davis Jr.'s life took a horrifying turn. On November 19, 1954, driving back from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, he got into a car accident near San Bernardino. He'd grown superstitious after a friend, Eddie Cantor, gave him a mezuzah for good luck. That night, Sammy forgot to wear it. In a freakish twist, the bullet-shaped horn button from his Cadillac slammed into his face, costing him his left eye. He wore an eye patch for 6 months, then replaced it with a glass eye for the rest of his life. The event changed him profoundly, on multiple levels. Eddie Cantor, who visited Sammy in the hospital, pointed out the cultural parallels between the Jewish and black experiences, inspiring Sammy to study Judaism. He'd been raised Catholic, though his father was Baptist, but decided after this accident that Jewish resilience resonated with him. By 1960, he fully converted. The accident also catapulted him to a new level of fame, ironically. The heartbreak of losing an eye, combined with a steely determination to bounce back, made him a figure of admiration in show business. In 1956, now sporting his glass eye, he starred in the Broadway musical Mr. Wonderful. Critics disliked the show itself, but it was a box office success, 383 performances. Meanwhile, in 1957, Sammy engaged in a romantic entanglement with actress Kim Novak, who was white and under contract with Columbia Pictures. The film studio's head, Harry Cohn, panicked, fearing an interracial relationship would damage the box office. The rumor mill says mob figures threatened Sammy. Some say John Roselli had him kidnapped for a few hours. Others allege gangster Mickey Cohen warned Davis's father. Whatever the truth, it was enough to scare Davis into abruptly ending the relationship. In 1958, possibly under that same mob pressure, he briefly married dancer Lorraine White, a sham union that ended after a few months. The couple never lived together. Davis drank heavily after the wedding and once held a gun to his head in despair. "Why won't they let me live my life?" he cried, a question that would haunt him for years. Meanwhile, in 1959, Sammy had a short, stormy, exciting relationship with Nichelle Nichols, the future Star Trek actress. That same year, he joined Frank Sinatra's Rat Pack along with Dean Martin, Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. Sinatra, initially calling the group the Klan, changed the name after Sammy expressed unease that Klan sounded too reminiscent of the Ku Klux Klan. They became the Summit, though outsiders called them the Rat Pack, referencing the earlier crew led by Humphrey Bogart. Sammy's presence in that illustrious circle turned heads. He was black, short, and comedic, yet commanded a powerhouse voice. He was often singled out as the comedic heart of the group, ready to endure jokes about his race, religion, or missing eye as part of their famously irreverent stage banter. The 1960s brought new challenges. In 1960, Sammy married Swedish actress May Britt in a Jewish ceremony, an interracial, interfaith marriage. In 23 American states at that time, anti-miscegenation laws were still on the books. Some polls suggested that only 4% of Americans approved of black-white marriages. The newlyweds endured racist vitriol, but they soldiered on, adopting 2 sons, Mark and Jeff, and having a daughter, Tracy. However, the social backlash was intense. Rumor has it that President John F. Kennedy refused to let Davis perform at his 1961 inauguration because he feared Sammy's presence might anger Southerners. Davis was stung by this snub. Then, in 1968, he and Britt divorced. The aftermath of Sammy's affair with singer Lola Falana, which strained their marriage. The separation triggered an even darker spiral. Davis turned to alcohol, drugs like cocaine, and even dabbled in Satanism for a time. A bizarre chapter, to say the least, with him befriending the Church of Satan's high priest, Anton LaVey. Even after drifting away from the church, he occasionally performed satanic rituals. It was a disconcerting personal journey for someone who'd boasted such a warm, comedic public persona. In 1970, Sammy married dancer Altovisa Gore, who had been in his show Golden Boy. They adopted a son, Manny, in 1989. Some reports indicate that by the end of Sammy's life, Altovise shared their home with a longtime girlfriend of Sammy's. His personal life was complicated, to say the least, full of contradictory facets. Professionally, though, the early 1970s delivered a boon when he recorded The Candyman in 1972. He initially hated the track, thinking it was too cutesy, but it soared to #1 on the charts, temporarily reviving his standing as a musician. The rest of the decade saw him produce more lounge performances, cameo appearances, and comedic spots on talk shows. He also ventured into television in more unexpected ways. He was rumored to love soap operas, even making cameo appearances on General Hospital and recurring as Chip Warren on One Life to Live. He was also a game show enthusiast, popping up on Family Feud and Tattletales in the 70s. Politically, he'd once been a staunch Democrat who supported John and Robert Kennedy. But he also befriended President Richard Nixon, campaigning for him in 1972. That endorsement alienated some fans and friends who felt Nixon's positions on civil rights were insufficient. Davis later regretted the alignment, complaining that Nixon hadn't delivered on promises. By the mid-1970s, Sammy was back championing more progressive issues. Another footnote. In 1972, at Nixon's request, Sammy visited U.S. troops in Vietnam, entertaining them and exploring drug abuse rehabilitation programs. He performed for up to 15,000 troops, receiving a heartfelt response from war-weary soldiers. This dual identity as a showbiz icon, who also did White House sleepovers, the first African American to do so, and perform for presidents, puzzled some fans, but Sammy liked bridging worlds. Years of drinking led to cirrhosis. In 1985, he sponsored the Sammy Davis Jr. National Liver Institute in Newark, trying to help others avoid his fate. Yet as the decade wore on, he faced repeated health scares. The ultimate blow came in 1989 during a joint tour with Frank Sinatra and Liza Minnelli. Diagnosed with throat cancer, he considered surgery but chose radiation therapy first so he could keep his voice. The treatment only worked for a short time. As the cancer recurred, he realized radical surgery was the only option, but it was too late. By early 1990, Sammy Davis Jr. was losing his capacity to speak or sing. His final months were a swirl of hospital visits, statements to the press about his regrets over the years, and a sense that he'd lived multiple lifetimes in one 64-year span. He died on May 16, 1990, at his Beverly Hills home, succumbing to complications from throat cancer. The entertainment world reeled. On the day of his funeral, 2 days later, the neon lights of the Las Vegas Strip dimmed for 10 minutes in tribute to their fallen star. In a strange cosmic twist, Jim Henson of Muppets fame also died that same day, overshadowing or amplifying the shock. Sammy Davis Jr. was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. He left behind an estate valued at about $4 million, but he also owed more than $7 million in back taxes to the IRS. His widow, Altavice, inherited the estate and the debt, leading to auctions of personal effects and a frantic scramble by well-connected friends to raise funds. In the years after his death, many found themselves reflecting on the kaleidoscopic life of Sammy Davis Jr., a man who started out as a toddler in a traveling vaudeville act, eventually became a one-eyed Jewish African-American star known as Mr. Show Business. The tension of being short, black, Jewish, and singularly talented in a world rife with prejudice gave him an edge. He overcame institutional barriers, like having to stay in a colored hotel while performing for white audiences in Las Vegas, and soared to stardom. He performed on Broadway in Golden Boy, starred in films, some comedic, some dramatic, and found his place among the Rat Pack. He left behind a series of paradoxes: a civil rights champion who simultaneously endorsed Nixon, an irrepressible comedic presence who briefly sank into the murky world of Satanism, a performer beloved by mainstream audiences who faced vile racism at nearly every turn. He also changed the cultural landscape. In 1967, Nancy Sinatra's special Move-In with Nancy broadcast a playful on-screen kiss between Nancy and Sammy, likely one of the first black-white kisses in American television history. The fact that it was only 1967 underscores how far behind popular media still was in representing interracial acceptance. In 1964, he'd become the first African American to sing at the Copacabana, a milestone for representation in New York's famed nightclub scene. Throughout his entire career, he hammered away at bigotry simply by being unstoppable. People might hate that he was black or Jewish or that he married a white woman, but he kept performing, kept smiling, kept forging new paths, forcing the mainstream to accept him. Over time, the bigotry he encountered gave way to the love fans had for his boundless talent. And talent is the word that resonates. The man could sing, dance, act, do impressions, play multiple instruments, do comedic stand-up bits, and even juggle comedic timing with serious drama. He once quipped that he could do anything except stand tall. Sammy was famously about 5'5", but that never stopped him from towering on stage. One night he'd show up with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, delivering irreverent banter that made audiences laugh so hard they cried. The next night, he'd be on a set filming a cameo or belting a tune for a new record. Then he'd host a telethon or show up at a political rally, weaving in and out of realms that few entertainers would dare cross. His personal relationships with folks like Elvis Presley or James Bond producers. He had a cameo in Elvis, That's the Way It Is, 1970, and nearly popped up in the 1971 Bond flick Diamonds Are Forever before being cut. In 1972, The Candyman soared to number one, ironically revitalizing his musical presence just when critics were calling him a relic. No single figure was more recognized or teased in comedic roasts or variety shows. He was always game for a joke about his short stature, his glass eye, or his unstoppable grin. The charm of Sammy Davis Jr. was that he took those jokes with grace, using them to deflect prejudice or show the world that no matter how he looked or what people thought of him, he remained unstoppable. He stands now as an emblem of classic American show business, bridging the eras of vaudeville, big band nightclubs, the dawn of TV, and the modern motion picture industry. Younger generations might discover him through YouTube clips of the Rat Pack performing in old black and white segments, or from historical documentaries about the civil rights era. Or they may recall the cameo appearance in a comedic show referencing him as a close friend of Sinatra. The synergy between Sammy and Frank Sinatra was legendary. Sinatra admired Sammy's resilience, and Sammy admired Sinatra's willingness to break color barriers by insisting that clubs in Vegas treat Sammy as an equal. But Sammy Davis Jr. always stood on his own 2 feet, ultimately. He was a man who described himself as a one-eyed Jewish black man, a mouthful of identity that defied easy categorization. He left the stage spinning in his wake, enthralling us with every step. Cancer took his voice, then his life, leaving behind an estate mired in debt to the IRS. But the tributes poured forth, from the bright lights of Las Vegas going dark for 10 minutes to the friends who raised money to bail out his widow from the crushing debts. The America that had once forced him to stay in a separate hotel years earlier now mourned him as a national treasure. The monument of Sammy Davis Jr. is not a single statue or plaque, but the tapestry of American entertainment he helped shape. Today, if you happen to watch one of his old performances, maybe a black and white clip of him dancing with the Will Maston Trio, or an episode of his cameo on All in the Family, or a Rat Pack comedic routine in glitzy Las Vegas, take a moment to consider how each step, each note, each comedic line was part of a life lived at full throttle. He overcame unimaginable prejudice, overcame horrific injuries, overcame a swirl of personal chaos, and still found it in himself to crack a joke or serenade an audience with that lush baritone. Sammy Davis Jr. was a man who danced on the cusp of heartbreak and triumph. He was the unstoppable showman who turned a glass eye into an emblem of survival, converting to Judaism for spiritual meaning, defying norms by dating or marrying whomever he chose, forging alliances with whomever he liked politically. He paid a hefty price for that freedom, facing death threats, forced sham marriages, social censure, yet his artistry never wavered. He taught the world that talent can open doors, even doors that bigotry tries to slam shut. A few months before he died, he said to a friend, "If I die, I want you to celebrate. Don't cry too long. Just go out there and keep making people smile." That might sum him up. A man who spent his life turning adversity into entertainment, heartbreak into spectacle, forging empathy with every high kick and note. So if we can glean anything from his story, it's that even when you stand alone with the odds stacked against you, you can still seize the stage, belt your song, and change the world's tune, if only for a few mesmerizing moments. And for Sammy Davis Jr., those moments stretched across decades, leaving an indelible mark on the tapestry of American music, dance, and comedic showmanship.